very, very excited to introduce. Not too long ago, a friend of mine got in contact with me and he said, what do you know about this Rhonda Patrick person? I said, Rhonda Patrick? I'm not exactly sure. I haven't heard. He's like, dude, go right now, pull up the Joe Rogan podcast and download Joe Rogan's interview with Rhonda Patrick. He said she's like your mental sister. She's talking about all the stuff that you constantly talk about. And I was like, okay, well, I haven't heard of this person. So I started digging in a little bit. I pulled up the podcast and listened to it and immediately sent out a tweet to Rhonda, got in contact with her. I said, the paleo community really doesn't know about you. This is going to be your coming out party. But this community is going to embrace and love everything you have to say. So, Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Dr. Rhonda Patrick has a PhD in biomedical science and has done extensive research on aging, cancer, metabolism, and nutrition. She has published in multiple high-impact scientific journals, including Nature and Science, and is an expert on the science behind nutrition, health, and longevity. This presentation is going to knock your socks off, I guarantee it. Please welcome Rhonda Patrick.
Thank you for that fantastic introduction, Keith. I'm not sure I'm quite the expert that Keith says. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. But I have been doing some research for quite some time now. As Keith mentioned, I have a PhD in biomedical science, and I've done research on aging, mitochondrial metabolism, cancer, and now I'm doing research on nutrition and micronutrient deficiencies, like vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and how these deficiencies can precipitate diseases of aging, like cancer and neurodegenerative disease. So, but in addition to that, I have a platform called Found My Fitness, where I like to break down the science behind nutrition, health, and fitness to the general public in a way that you all can understand. And also in a way that's accurate, because that's really important. I think there's a lot of press, a lot of people trying to get this health and nutrition information from scientific studies, and oftentimes they're not accurate in what they glean from those studies. So today I'm going to talk to you about how what you eat in your diet, particularly micronutrients, how things like exercise and even something called hyperthermic conditioning can change the expression of your genes. And so what does gene expression mean? So we can actually measure the expression of thousands of different genes at once through something called gene microwave profiling. And genes that are expressed, they're active. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And those are typically indicated in red. And genes that are not expressed, they're not active. And so they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Even though the gene is there, it's almost as if it wasn't there. And what's really interesting about these changes in gene expression is that they're regulated by what we eat, by how much we eat, by what we don't eat, by how much exercise we get, how stressed we are, how much sleep, what time of day it is. I can go on and on. And I'll get into this epigenetic part in a little bit. But I want to highlight the importance of a particular micronutrient called vitamin D, which is actually a fat-soluble vitamin that it gets converted into a steroid hormone that regulates the expression of over 900 genes in the human body. So that's, to give you some perspective, about 1/24 of the human genome regulated by this steroid hormone, vitamin D steroid hormone. And vitamin D can turn on and turn off expression of genes. So I recently published a paper a couple of months ago in FASEB Journal where I found a mechanism by which vitamin D turns on the expression of this gene that makes an enzyme called tryptophan hydroxylase. Tryptophan hydroxylase is the rate-limiting enzyme that converts tryptophan into serotonin. And serotonin regulates a wide variety of behaviors, emotional behavior, aggression, anxiety. It regulates cognitive function, learning, and memory. So the fact that vitamin D is important to make this enzyme, and this enzyme makes serotonin in your brain, shows you that vitamin D is regulating some brain functions that also impact your behavior. Not only does vitamin D regulate your brain, but it also regulates the aging process. So telomeres are tiny caps at the end of your chromosome. So every cell in your body has 46 chromosomes, and your DNA is wound up inside these chromosomes. And telomeres are these little like orange caps at the end of these chromosomes that protect your DNA from oxidative damage, from inflammation, from these things that can damage your DNA and cause mutations that are irreversible. So you can kind of think of telomeres like like the tips of shoelaces, so they protect your shoelaces from fraying. And what's really interesting is that telomere length is actually a biomarker for aging. So the younger you are, the longer your telomeres are. And as you age, your telomeres get shorter. And that's because we lose about 21 structural units off of our telomeres every year. So every time the cells in your body, whether they're liver cells or pancreatic cells or immune cells, whatever cell type it is, it's as it's proliferating and dividing, it starts to lose telomeres every year until they're shorter and shorter and shorter. And eventually, there's no telomeres left. So what happens at that point is your cell goes into a crisis and it decides to die or go into a permanent state of arrest. And at this point, your cell isn't functioning anymore. So literally, as your telomeres get shorter, your life gets shorter. It's a biomarker for aging. And we know it's involved in the aging process. Some diseases that have aberrancies or abnormalities in maintaining their telomere length, such as Werner syndrome, is an accelerated, they age at an accelerated rate. So if you look here, a woman at 15 years looks about normal, and then at 48 years, she looks like she's about 98. So telomere length does play a role in how we age. So this brings me back to vitamin D. A few studies have looked at the role of vitamin D in telomere length, and one particular study that I like is one that was done on 2,100 different twin pairs. And they measured the vitamin D levels in these twins, and what they found was that those twins with the highest levels of vitamin D, serum levels of vitamin D, had the longest telomere length. And those with the shortest had the shortest telomere length. And what they found was that the difference in that telomere length corresponded to 5 years of aging. So those twins with shorter telomeres, even though chronologically they were the same age as their sibling, their cells, the cells in their body looked like they were 5 years older, which really highlights the importance of this difference between your chronological age in years and your biological age. So the way you treat your body, what you're eating, and how much you exercise and things like this impact your biological age. So you can actually have someone who is chronologically older but biologically younger because they're getting the right micronutrients, they're doing the right things, exercising and doing things like paleo where they're lowering inflammation, not eating a lot of sugar and things like that. So the mechanism by which vitamin D regulates telomere length brings me back to the gene expression. So vitamin D increases the expression of genes that are involved in repairing damaged DNA. They're DNA repair enzymes. So it lowers DNA damage, which is one thing that can make your telomeres get shorter. The other way is that vitamin D increases the expression of anti-inflammatory genes, and it decreases the expression of pro-inflammatory genes. So vitamin D is lowering inflammation. Inflammation also can accelerate telomere shortening. So these are the two mechanisms by how vitamin D can change gene expression, and that can regulate the way you age. So just to highlight the importance of vitamin D in the aging process, these mice here are the same age. The mouse on the left here is vitamin D deficient, and the mouse on the right has normal levels of vitamin D, and they're about 4.5 months old here. Here are the same mice 4 months later. So the vitamin D deficient mouse looks pretty gnarly. I'd say that's probably an understatement. But there's tons of different multifunction, dysfunction going on where there's a variety of different genes. 900 different genes are being dysregulated, and that's affecting the way this mouse is aging. And what's really terrifying is that the most recent survey by NHANES found that 70% of the US population does not meet the requirement for adequate levels of vitamin D. 70%. So to me, that's terrifying, but why is that? So vitamin D, we can make it from the sun. We can convert something called 7-dehydrocholesterol in our skin to vitamin D3, but this depends on UVB light. So you need UVB light to interact in order to convert this cholesterol into vitamin D. But things like sunscreen and dark skin color filter out the burning rays of the sun, so they filter out UVB light, but they also prevent the body from making its own vitamin D. In addition to that, high body fat can regulate the bioavailability of vitamin D. So vitamin D is fat soluble, it's stored in fat. The more body fat you have, the less bioavailable it is to be released into the bloodstream. Vitamin D3 gets released into the bloodstream, and then if you're making it in the skin, if you're eating it orally, of course, it gets absorbed. But then it gets converted into this pre-hormone in the liver and then goes to the kidney where it gets converted into the active hormone, which regulates all these genes. So body fat can also affect the bioavailability of vitamin D. In addition to that, age. So the older you are, the less efficient your body is at making its own vitamin D from UVB light. In fact, a 70-year-old makes 1/4 less vitamin D in their skin than their former 20-year-old self. So all these things are impacting the micronutrient, the vitamin D deficiency that's very prevalent in the United States and actually even globally.